What's going on, everyone? So the San Antonio Spurs have waived Jamari Buoya from the two-way contract. So now the roster stands at 15 players on standard contracts, 2 players on two-way contracts, 3 players on training camp deals, and 1 open two-way roster spot. Now, as far as Jamari goes, 25 years old, he did a little bit of everything in the G League last year. He had a really nice all-around game. I gave you 17 points, 7.3 assists, 6 rebounds, 2.1 steals, and 1.4 blocks. Now, obviously, the G League is not the NBA. We've seen plenty of guys put up incredible stats in the G League, and it just never translates to the actual NBA. He is really kind of undersized at 6'2", maybe 6'3", but probably closer to 6'2". This is kind of just a nothing burger in the sense of like impact for the Spurs, because obviously two-way deal. He's a bit older, so it's a guy that, even if you're looking at as a development piece, right? How long are you going to develop him for? You develop him 2-3 years. He's now 28, right? When that's supposed to be when guys are actually entering their prime. So, I don't think that there's any like love lost here as far as the Spurs go, but they do have a two-way spot open. They do have an open two-way roster spot. And the question now, I think, becomes, do the Spurs fill that two-way roster spot? Now, the Spurs were interested in Christian Coloco. They were one of the teams that were on the list that wanted to bring in the big man. He ultimately signed with the Los Angeles Lakers on a two-way contract. He, in my opinion, would have been perfect for the Spurs. But that is a signal to me that maybe the Spurs are interested in a big man. Can they find somebody out on the market that is, an undervalued big man that maybe they can come in, maybe use as a development big? I have talked about, when you're thinking of other big men, obviously, they have Zach Collins. I know many Spurs fans want him on the next thing smoking out, right? But Victor Wembanyama, I don't hate the idea of, at least for now, obviously if he starts growing into his grown man body and, depending on the size that he is able to put on and stuff, shifting him over to the 4. Now, I'm not saying you have to play him solely as a 4, but you think of the Western Conference, think of how many just big, physical, burly big men are in the West. Particularly guys like Jokic and then Mao with Zach Edey, right? Like, you have several big guys that Wemby's going to have to face 4 times a season. It's just, do you really want him matching up and just getting banged up against these big bodies that are physical, that are imposing, right? Like, where if you could get a big man that can kind of come in and take some of the pressure off of Victor. Also, I think it'd be nice to just kind of get another, like, Christian Coloco made a lot of sense for the Spurs because Christian Coloco is yes, he's a project. Yes, he has things that he needs to develop and grow on. Obviously, he was just coming off of a serious medical condition that looked career-ending, but he was able to have, some breakthroughs and get that worked out, which is beautiful, right? You always love to see an underdog story. You always love to see somebody kind of getting a second chance here. But I thought he would have been, like, the Spurs made a lot of sense for him as well, because he is a shot-blocking, floor-running big man that has shown a little bit of the ability to stretch the floor. But, as of right now, he's just kind of a guy that high energy, high motor, right, coming in, getting rebounds, blocking shots. He's even shown the ability to stay in front of guys out on the perimeter, which I think would be very versatile. And he's a true 7-footer. He's the kind of guy that you'd want to, slot alongside Victor, and then good luck scoring inside between Victor and him. He also has a 7'5" and a half wingspan. So, he's got the size, got the length. Like, obviously they can't get Coloco, but somebody like that, can you get a big, sizable, long, kind of versatile big man, shot blocking big man that you might be a little high on? Somebody that you think, hey, we can bring this guy in, kind of let him get some work, develop him for a year or two, and then maybe slot him as, even your primary backup, or, if it really goes well, then yeah, I mean, you could slot him as your starter alongside Wemby. And again, that doesn't mean that you can't play Wemby at the 5. You could still absolutely play Wemby at the 5. You could even close with Wemby at the 5 at times. You could do stuff like that. You've seen plenty of teams kind of make moves like that and do things like that, depending on the various matchups and stuff. Plus, you even have teams like the Timberwolves that are running 2 bigs and stuff. So it'd be nice to have somebody that, could kind of handle the big guy, and then Victor can kind of be out on the perimeter, guarding like Cat and stuff. It's just more to me about, can you find ways to kind of preserve Wemby as much as possible, right? Not have to have him take as much wear and tear. Because Wemby is very thin, right? I mean, to put this in perspective, he weighs the same weight as Bronny James, who's like 6'1", right? Like, that was one of the stats that came out when Bronny got drafted, that Bronny and Wemby are the same weight, right? Like, so you're talking about a guy that is the weight of a guard, that is the size of a center, that you're asking to match up against big physical centers all game, all night, particularly in the Western Conference, right? So, I mean, I like the idea, and it's something that I've talked about in the past, of just kind of getting Wemby some help at the center spot, getting Wemby somebody that can come in and give you the rebounding, so it's not all on Wemby. They can give you some shot blocking, so it's not all on Wemby, right? And then imagine Wemby as like just a help defender. My goodness, with all his size and all his length and versatility, I mean, again, good luck. That guy would just be a monster, just with his reach and everything. But, I do think there is an argument. Like, do you look for a guy that you want to develop over the next few years, or do you look for a guy that, may be able to, as soon as next season, kind of step in and play a role, right? Like, do you look for a guy that's, whatever it is, even if it's not a big man, right? Do you look for a guy that, say, is, 20, where it's like, we could develop this guy the next 2-3 years, and then bring him in and have another, like, influx of young talent? Or do you look to bring in a guy that's, 24, right? That it's like, oh man, this guy can come in. Do you look for like a Blake Hinson, right? The Lakers let go of Blake Hinson. Blake Hinson, 6'8", lethal 3-point shooter. That could be kind of interesting for the Spurs. That could be a nice little, acquisition. Spurs have options. I'm sure Pop is going to weigh the options for sure, right? I think he's going to take his time and just kind of unpacking, who to bring in on a 2-way. But, you're a couple weeks out from training camp, so I imagine that they're going to want to bring somebody in sooner rather than later, so that way you can, bring in a guy and he can start prepping and getting ready, and then you can bring him into training camp and, kind of let him get a feel, kind of let him get a workout with the squad, with the team, right? Like, I think that there's some options in that regard. I still lean towards a big man personally. I think that that's something, a guy. I mean, in a perfect world, you get somebody that's versatile, that could play, that could slot in at the 4 or the 5, right? Like, get somebody that, could back up Wemby, but also could play alongside Wemby. But, like I said, on the bigger matchups, could play the 5 to take pressure off of Wemby, right? So you kind of flip-flop the two, that could be kind of nice. But there's also, I mean, the Spurs are such a young team, and so it's just kind of like, take the best player, right? Like, who's the best player you can get on a 2-way, or who's the guy that you believe has the most upside and potential, right? But I think you could also argue with the acquisitions of like Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, and the rumors all offseason of the Spurs looking at various trades, not just for like young guys, but for guys that could help now, right? Lauri Markkanen. There's even still talks and rumors about like a Brandon Ingram, a Darius Garland, like these guys. The Spurs I could see, kind of going like, hey, in the next year or two, we'd like to be good, like really good. Not just like, oh, maybe we'll make a play in, right? Like, no, like we want to be, top 5 team at some point, sooner rather than later, especially with Wemby and how good Wemby's been and how good Wemby is, period, right? You got to imagine that they would want to kind of expedite that process, especially before Wemby starts getting paid, right now you are in a position to where you can kind of take some risks. You can kind of, take a contract guy that you might not otherwise, just because Wemby's so cheap that, like, on most cases it's like, oh, with the new CBA we would never do this. But it's like, man, this guy's contract lines up with Wemby getting a new one, so maybe we can squeeze out a championship before, Wemby gets his new contract. Just thought processes that are going to have to be worked out by the Spurs. But regardless, I'm looking forward to see what they do. And as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Are you in the camp of like, yeah, go get a big man, somebody that you can grow and develop, maybe slot in at the 4, maybe slot in at the 5, especially with Wemby's versatility, right? Like, and you could even do something where Wemby's the 5 on offense and the 4 on defense, right? It's always something you could do. There's always creative ways and ways that you can work things out. But again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you.